Good morning. Thank you for joining us here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida for the STS-133 pre-launch news conference for Space Shuttle Discovery's mission to the International Space Station. Joining me today is Mike Moses, Chair of the Pre-Launch Mission Management Team.
Good morning.
Mike Leinbach, Shuttle Launch Director.
Good morning.
And Kathy Winters, Shuttle Weather Officer.
Good morning.
We'll hear from our panelists and then we'll take questions. Mr. Moses.
Thanks, Kendra. Well, let's see. Welcome, everybody. We had our L-2 mission management team meeting this morning. Went very quickly. If I wouldn't have talked about how quickly it was going, it would have gone even faster. We didn't have any technical issues to discuss. Kathy will talk to you about the weather. We got a good briefing on what's in front of us with some of the fronts coming in and the tropical storm system down to the south. And I'll let her go into all that stuff. But again, no technical issues. Everybody pulled go to head into count. No problems whatsoever. You know, the last several days, and if you want to back up even more than that with the fuel leak that we had, it's been a very challenging time for the team. Some of those issues are more frustrating than anything. The two helium, or the helium leak and the nitrogen leak, the two gas leaks we had, were very straightforward in terms of how to fix them, but they had a lot of overhead that went along with them in terms of the hazardous ops required and the vents and the work to get in there. And it's like working on your car. You gotta fix it, repair it, and then hook it back up and then check it and see if you got it working right. And sometimes that gets a little frustrating for the teams, but they held together beautifully. They performed outstanding, working all weekend long and got everything buttoned up. We needed to take a little bit of extra time, mostly for those constraints that we were talking about with the hazardous clears. And once that was done, we're sitting there in great shape out at the pad. The mission's in great shape. A couple-day delay there is not going to change the mission timeline at all. The launch window's all good too. We have all the way through the 7th. The teams back in Houston have been working kind of behind the scenes right before, right around FRR timeframe last week. The orbiter team was working on some ways to possibly increase the thermal limits that we're allowed to go to, what we call beta angle, which is the sun angle. When the shuttle's by itself, we can kind of maneuver and get to we call it a PTC, a passive thermal control, where we basically do a barbecue roll, so to speak, a rotisserie with the shuttle, where we roll it so that not one side's always facing at the sun. That lets it stay evenly heated. When we're docked to station, we can't do that, so our thermal limits docked to station become a problem. So they looked at expanding our ability to take care of our thermal limits after we undock, and that's starting to look pretty good. The station team's looking at what we can do while we're docked. We may be able to find a way to squeak out the 8th as a launch day with some creative timelining, basically closing hatches and being ready to undock right away in the morning. But we're not going there yet, and obviously we don't need to talk about that for a long time, hopefully never, and when we launch on time here on Wednesday. So just to let you know, if we do scrub, we'll be looking at maybe squeezing out one more day. Again, we got to talk about range issues and all that stuff, but right now still everything's clear and in great shape. And that's all I had for you this morning. Mike?
Okay, well, thanks. Well, I don't have a lot to report this morning. We got into the countdown yesterday on time. We should be into PRSD load. That's the load of the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen for the fuel cells. That should be going on, should be picking up right now as I speak. We'll be doing our standard rest of the countdown with RSS retract about 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, and looking for the opening of the window at 3:47 Wednesday afternoon with a preferred launch time of 3:52. Plus or minus a few seconds, and of course we'll adjust that real time on launch day with the flight director out of Houston. Right now we're not tracking any issues at all that would prevent launch or really bothering us at all. There are a couple little nits out there, but it's very, very typical kind of issues for this point in the countdown. Nothing that's going to hold us up at all, really. Mike mentioned the scrub turnaround options. We have 4 attempts in 5 days, which history says we should have a good high 90% kind of time percentile of getting off the pad with those 4 attempts in 5 days. So everything's going really, really well. We recovered from our problems over the weekend and in fine shape. I went through the fire room this morning. The team is in great spirits. They're looking forward to launching Discovery for the final time and getting her on to a great mission. And that's all I have. Kathy?
Well, the weather has been very nice here the last few days in the Central Florida area. We are expecting, though, a bit of a transition as we get into midweek. On launch day, we should start seeing more moisture migrate into the area. With that, we always have some concerns for some low cloud ceilings and also a chance for some isolated showers in the area. So we do have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. Now, if we happen to delay 24 hours, then the weather gets a little more difficult. We do have a front that's expected to move through the area, dragging an upper level low that's going to be sitting off in the western Gulf of Mexico over Florida. And then we expect much more chance for showers, low cloud ceilings, and even a chance for an isolated thunderstorm in the area on Thursday. So with that, on Thursday, we have 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch. On Friday, the front will push through, and then we'll have some strong winds behind it, and due to the threat of a violation of winds at the launch pad, and also a low cloud ceiling, if we happen to delay 48 hours, then we may end up we also have a 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch, just due to the post-frontal weather. The TAL sites look good on launch day. All 3 sites are go, our forecast go. And also on day 2 as well, except for just Zaragoza has a slight chance for some fog, both on if we happen to delay 24 hours and also 48 hours. So overall, TAL sites are looking good. I do want to show the satellite picture so I can show you Tropical Storm Tomas that is down in the Caribbean, become more disorganized over the last 24 hours as it's been under a lot of shear. It is expected, though, to become in a less shear environment, if you will, get into a better environment and possibly redevelop. But it's not going to be an issue for us here in Florida or for the SRB recovery area for the next 5 to 7 days. Beyond that, one of the models is trying to linger it down there in the Caribbean as opposed to making a northeast move like most of the models are doing. So we'll just keep watching it, but so far looking good. Now, the SRB recovery area looks good for launch day, just 5 to 6 foot seas. But if as they remain out there for a couple more days, we do expect the seas to pick up to 8 to 11 feet by Friday out in that area. So it is going to be a bit bumpy for them for SRB recovery. But overall, it looks like Wednesday's kind of the transition day. That's the best day for us to go out of the 3 days that we're talking about. So hopefully we go on that day. 30% chance of KSC weather prohibiting launch.
Thank you. We'll now take questions. When the microphone comes your way, please state your name, affiliation, and to whom you're addressing your question. We'll start over here with Bill.
Bill Harwood, CBS for Mike Leinbach. All orbiters, they used to joke that Columbia, had a lot of trouble getting to the pad, but once it got there, everything was great. Does Discovery have a personality to you as you go into this last flow in terms of how it's behaved over the years, or any thoughts you have about making this last launch?
No, Discovery's been a fine ship. We have kidded a couple times in the past about getting Columbia on orbit, but that was only because we loved her too. The teams themselves are a bit different. They have different personality in the processing teams. I think I've talked to you about that before. And so the teams are bringing a little bit different atmosphere to their integrated scheduling meetings or their meetings over in the orbiter processing facility. Discovery herself is a fine ship. She's ready to go. Just hate to see her retire so early in her life, that's all.
Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press, for Mike Moses. If Thursday's forecast is so bad, and I missed that percentage, I think you...
Mike dropped me a little here telling me I said 30. I think it's 60% chance of violating constraints.
Okay. If that remains the case on Wednesday and you don't go Wednesday for weather or something else minor, would you just skip Thursday and try for Friday given the bad forecast, or do you think what's the thinking right now?
Well, the good news is if that happens, we'll be just 24 hours out from that forecast, have a much better definition of what it really is, what the violations really are. But given the PRSD loading that Mike was talking about with our scrub turnaround having 4 attempts in 5 days, it may or may not buy us something to hop over that day. Right now, I wouldn't make that decision ahead of time. We'll just wait till we get there.
And for either of the two Mikes, is there any sadness that you detect in the hallways? It's exciting going into a launch, but this is the last launch for Discovery, and I'm just wondering what you see as the mood of the people that you just see walking up and down the hallways.
Well, so I'll take it first. I think I talked to you last time in a press conference about there's still a certain amount of disbelief that it's really her final launch. We all know it. We've come to grips with that fact, but it's hard to believe after having Discovery and the rest of the fleet for 30 years flying so well for America to bring it to an end. So it's difficult to accept emotionally, but rationally we all know it's coming to an end and we need to get on with it. We'll finish this mission and then put Discovery in the transition retirement phase and start safing her and getting her ready for ultimate disposition in some museum somewhere. I'm not quite sure where it's going.
Irene Klotz with Reuters. Kathy, could you just go through the no-goes for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Because I think
Thanks.
Right. Okay. On Wednesday, there's a 30% chance of case of weather prohibiting launch. Thursday is the day the front moves through, and that's the 60% chance. And then on Friday, we're back to a 30% chance.
No, you said that wrong. It's only 5% each day. Right?
That's right.
At least in my dreams.
It's 50-50 every day.
It's 50-50 every day.
Okay. Rob.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com for Mike Leinbach. I know your own history goes back with the agency to 1984. Do you have any distinct memories about watching Discovery fly for the first time? And are there any members who are going to be in the firing room who were on console for that first launch?
Second part of your question, the answer is yes. We've had there are members of the launch team that have been around since STS-1, and so we will do something to recognize them. My own personal recollections, when I was a test director, the NASA test director of the launch NTD, STS-33R was my first mission with Discovery, a Department of Defense mission with Fred Gregory as the commander. So I have a lot of memories of Discovery, of course, as we all do, and it goes back quite some time. It's going to be hard to see her end, but we're looking forward to a great mission and seeing her on the runway and greeting the crew when they get back, as we always do.
In the back, please.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News. Have you given any thought to how you'll say Godspeed to Discovery when it launches? Is anyone giving you any advice?
I'm not good at taking advice, so that goes with the job. That's one of the qualifications for the job, is you're not good at taking advice, which is actually the opposite. No, I haven't thought of that yet, but I'm sure something will come to me driving in Wednesday morning.
Okay. Ken?
Hi, Ken Kramer for Spaceflight Magazine for Mike Leinbach. I wonder if you could tell us a little stories about the actual people who are preparing Discovery for the final time.
Stories of the people. Gosh, thousands and thousands of stories out there. Oh, man. There are so many stories and so many parties and so many recollections. I'd hate to single out just a few. I would like to point out two people that deserve a lot of credit for processing Discovery in the last phase of her career, which is Stephanie Stilson, the NASA Flow Director, and Wayne Bingham, the Flow Manager for the United Space Alliance. Those two folks have really led their team in an outstanding manner, kept them together in the face of adversity, have processed the ship just extremely well, and all the credit for a great mission from a hardware perspective goes to those two individuals and obviously the folks that work for them.
Todd?
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for either of the mics. I'm wondering if you can just reflect for us on the retirement of the shuttle fleet and what your thoughts are about the wisdom of doing that at a time where we don't have a replacement ship yet.
Let's see, Mike's been talking for a while, so I'll attempt that one. You sure you don't want to ask about the weather? Let's see, ideal world, yeah, obviously you'd want to be able to, before you sell your current car and go buy a new one, you want to make sure you got the next one to buy, or same thing with the house or anything. You'd like to have the next thing ready to jump right into. So from that standpoint, it's a little different. But the realities are that NASA is on a fixed budget, just like most American families, and without a big infusion of cash, we can only do a couple of things at a time. With all our aeronautics and science research, with the human spaceflight programs, and all the other work that's going on, you kind of have to share it amongst the family, and so to get another human spaceflight program started, we have to shut one down. Ideally, yeah, I'd love to have the cash to be able to do that together. And so from a wisdom standpoint's not the right word, because we're talking politics, and there's not always a lot of wisdom that goes into political decisions, but the realities are there. So yeah, there's a little bit of I wish we could do this differently, but then again, if this is what it is, we're going to make the best of it. We're going to take this shuttle team here that does an amazing job processing vehicles, does an amazing job operating and flying a spacecraft, and go apply them to the team that's off developing the new program, and we're going to make that one a successful human spaceflight program as well.
And just
I
to
might could I add just a little bit? I've shared this with a couple folks privately, and one thing you learn in our business is redundancy is not only good, and in some situations it's mandatory. When the shuttle stops flying, we will have a grand total of one way to get to the space station. And our Russian partners are outstanding partners, very, very reliable. Don't get me wrong. They're outstanding partners, and they'll do a terrific job. But you have redundancy for a reason, and without the shuttle, we lose that redundancy. And so, from an engineering perspective, it's not an emotional thing. It's an engineering shortfall that we won't have redundancy in getting astronauts to orbit.
And just a quick follow for either of you, Mikes. What are your thoughts about handing over the responsibility for flying U.S. astronauts into low Earth orbit to commercial companies rather than NASA doing that job?
A lot of it is going to go into the details of how those contracts are written, what oversight is there. You look at the model right now for all our science missions, and I'm not trying to equate a Mars orbiter to an astronaut flying to the station, but we effectively do that there. We contract that launch vehicle, and they provide services, but we still have a NASA Insight and Oversight team all the way down to having a NASA launch director on those missions that is providing a level of redundancy. I could envision a similar model, but again, the details of how you go write those contracts and the model of operation will dictate the end outcome. You got to be careful, right? Because there's the reason to do commercial spaceflight, which is exactly what NASA's purpose is, which is to promote technology development, seed the marketplace, to get everybody out there doing spaceflight, and to get the human race into orbit. Basically, that's our ultimate future and our ultimate goal. But you got to be careful. There's a lot of, Mike talks about redundancy. That's a great thing. People tend to throw at us that we're a big bureaucracy and we have a lot of paperwork and a lot of redundancy. We have it because we need it, because we fly perfectly. We do our best to fly perfectly. I'm not saying that commercial companies won't do it, but it's a lot easier before you start flying to show that maybe you don't need so much redundancy and bureaucracy and paperwork. And, just this afternoon, I'm going to go hear a waiver on a piece of paper that says that we're not violating any constraints on an antenna in the SRB because the number says it's 14 days before launch. And when we wrote the requirement, we didn't count for scrubs before we actually started SU-7. So here we delayed 2 days, and so I'm going to break my requirement. But if I would have started the countdown and delayed 2 days, I wouldn't have any paper to take. So, yeah, we have a fair bit of paperwork that you really wish you didn't have to deal with. And it really kind of makes no sense some days why you have some of that paperwork. But the system overall really drives you to a system of safety. And it's all driven towards that. When we talked about that with the work that was going on this weekend at the pad, it's sometimes frustrating that you're waiting on the paperwork. The engineers who are going to go turn the wrenches and replace those leaky QDs wrote what they're going to go do, but they can't do it until the paper comes back to them blessed and signed and checked by quality. And you really need that step because you never know when you're going to miss something, and that one little bolt, that one little fitting, that one little piece of plastic tubing could be the loss of the mission that day. And so we do want to make sure we're careful. I've gone off track a little bit from what you were talking about with commercial crew, but I think as long as you set it up right and you set the right architecture, the right framework, the right insight and oversight, there's no reason you couldn't be just as safe and successful with a commercial provider.
Bill.
Just a quick question for Kathy. Yesterday you said that you were indicating there might be a change in the weather, whatever. Is this an optimistic forecast today, or is there any trends out there that might turn this around tomorrow the other way?
Well, it all depends on the location of the upper level low in Texas. There are some differences on the models in those. So the closer that upper level low is to Florida, the more moisture, the more dynamics, the more chance of getting some showers in the area and a low cloud ceiling. So it's going to depend on where that drops. And so that's where 30% is covering. But we are noting that, it is a transition day. And every model run looks a little different. It shuffles when that moisture comes in, but Wednesday is definitely the transition day.
Denise Chow, Space.com. How has the launch delays affected the crew's pre-launch activities and schedule? Have the extra days just given them more time for training, or what have they been up to?
Yeah, they basically filled in some training. If you were out there a little earlier, you heard the STA flying over the shuttle training aircraft, which is the aircraft the astronauts used to simulate shuttle landings. They were flying approaches up at the SLF, the shuttle landing facility. Today's their last scheduled training run. They have another one on the books tomorrow if they want it, but but we'll have to wait and see what Commander Lindsay feels like. But yeah, they basically backfill some training and then kind of take a little bit of downtime. They've been pushing pretty hard to get here. Knowing how crews respond, they usually get into crew quarters. They immediately attack their books, study their procedures. They're at the business end of the mission, and they know they need to do it exactly right. And the more prep work they can do, the better. I think in some ways they appreciate having an extra day to study a little more, but at their own pace now. It's not somebody else driving their schedule, so you can kind of relax a little bit. But I know they're anxious to go, and we're anxious to get them out to the pad and launched.
Irene.
Thanks. Mike Moses, I think this is for you since you stuck your toe in the political waters. I know NASA tries to stay above politics, yet the political reality is the foundation which the space program operates. And in light of the fact that it seems that there's another pretty strong political shift that may take place tomorrow on Election Day, do you have any concerns or any thoughts about how that might impact NASA at all?
When I started in the shuttle program back a while back, the programs were there and moving along. The station program was there and moving along. Although at the time when I started, it was still there were quite a few years where only one vote made station live in Congress. So, but there was always the shuttle program that kind of isolated you from the roller coaster up and downs as you went through changes in congressional leadership. Administration leadership in the White House can sometimes change direction, but the vision for the space program has kind of been moving forward. We've hit a transition time right now, and just because we're in transition, you feel those political waves a lot more than you would have a few years ago. So, I don't think anything's different these days than it was at the last midterm elections, or wind back a couple more years, 4 or 8 years. I think this has always been there. That turmoil has always been there. It's just that because as an agency we're at a crossroads transition point right now, you're just feeling the ripples a little more. So yeah, there's going to be some changes, I think, coming out of the elections. Maybe not. Who knows? And does that mean a change of direction for NASA? Maybe. Who knows? But at the end of the day, we're the agents of the government, and we follow the orders both in terms of the authorization and the direction that the president sets, and then the funding that Congress provides for it. So we'll just wait and see if that mission changes, and we'll react accordingly.
Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press for Mike Leinbach. Are you anticipating lots of parties post-launch, or are you encouraging people to wait until we'll stop? I'm just wondering when the big festivities really kick in.
There's a whole team set up to recognize the employees and do different things for them. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't know when the final party for Discovery is. I've been kind of busy over the last couple of weeks. I'm sure there will be one. It'll probably be at our recreation center here on base. I'm certain it'll be after we'll stop, so we can all celebrate a successful mission. And there'll be a lot of hugging, a lot of patting on the back, I'm sure. I don't know when it is. I really don't. I'm looking forward to it, though.
Ken.
Hi, Ken Kramer for Spaceflight Magazine for Mike Leinbach and Mike Moses. Mike, you mentioned that Discovery is a great ship, has a lot of life left in her. Could you estimate somehow how many missions or years you think that could be?
Oh, boy. Well, all orbiters were designed for 100-mission life. The time was not as long as we've been flying them, but they were designed for 100 missions each. So in some respects, she's just in her early 30s, late 30s, something like that. Like the B-52. I mean, the B-52 is still flying. We upgrade the orbiters. They're in fine shape. They're to most people's view, they're the best they've ever been. They're the safest they've ever been. Could we keep on flying them? I believe we could, but that's not the direction we've been given, and so we need to get on with the direction. We may not like it, but that's the direction we've been given, and so we'll get on with retiring these ships and moving into the next program.
So kind of sounds like you think she could go another 10 years, maybe? Longer?
I think with proper care and feeding, it's a machine, after all, and machines, as long as you take care of them, they'll be good to you, too.
Are there any further questions? Todd.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for either Mike. I'm wondering if you can kind of give us a picture of what things are going to look like here in regard to the development of a heavy lift launch vehicle. The Congress has authorized you guys to move ahead with the development, and do you have any idea of what the regime of test flights might look like, and what's going to be going on here at the Kennedy Space Center in regard to heavy lift for the next 5 years?
Let's see, Todd. So the authorization language talks about a heavy lift vehicle, the Space Launch System. Obviously, there's going to need to be infrastructure changes here at Kennedy to support that. But anything that looks like a test flight or a schedule like that is really up in the air. We don't have the appropriations yet to know how much money's coming. We assume, based on last levels, what we would get. Also, the appropriations bill can have a lot of splits dictating earmarks that go to certain centers that have to have a split. All that can factor in to say how much money we're going to spend here at Kennedy Space Center on infrastructure upgrades. All I can say is we are definitely, if we're developing a heavy lift vehicle, obviously the launch pads, the processing facilities are all going to have to be modified or built new to accommodate that. And so that work's going on. There's a whole team of folks here at Kennedy who are off looking at that and laying it out. But it's still a little bit in limbo because we haven't yet picked an architecture, size of the vehicle, fuel that it would carry, upper stage size, all that stuff kind of dictates what you're going to do. It's pretty basic to say we're probably going to be processing in the VAB. We're going to be using Launch Complex 39. And other than that, all the cards are on the table to trade it out. So I don't have any specifics.
Well, and just to lay something out for you, Pad B is being raised down to the concrete, so it's more adaptable to any type vehicle. Pad A, we're going to leave it alone just in case after the final mission, we're going to leave it alone for some time in case the heavy lift vehicle is shuttle derived. Then we'd be able to adapt it much more easily than if we'd already demolished the thing. So we're going to leave Pad A alone until we know what the design is. As Mike says, the design of the infrastructure is dictated by the design of the rocket, not the other way. And so we're going to leave Pad A alone, betting on the come that it'll be shuttle derived. If it's not, well, then we'll react to those changes when it happens.
Okay, we'll take our last question over here, please.
Yeah, James Spahn with Nico Doga. Two quick questions for Mike Moses and Mike Lineback. After a successful mission, what's the process, length of and type of process to actually retire the ship, Discovery? And maybe from Mike Lineback, what do you want that plaque to say when she finds her final home in a museum?
Let's see, once Discovery's back, it'll follow about a 30-day-ish plan that's just the normal plan as if it was coming back and being turned around again. We call that down mission processing, where it gets back into the OPF. We safe the critical systems, get the payload infrastructure out that's mission-specific, take that out of the payload bay, basically deconfigure its specific mission configuration. And then it'll move into a phase that we're calling TNR, Transition and Retirement, where we move to a set of safing steps where like the fuel systems and the hydraulic systems are drained and decontaminated, and basically the ship is then prepared for its display state, and then be ready. That process is going to take, I forget what the timeline shows, but it's on the order of 6 to 8 months ish. I think end to end. It's fairly flexible because we don't yet know. We know what we're calling it the end state, so we know what condition to put the major systems, but we don't know the display state because we haven't gotten a request from the. Discovery hasn't been assigned necessarily to a specific museum. They haven't told us what configuration they would like it to be in, what hardware they would or would not like included. All that has to be negotiated. So that's an ongoing process, but we're looking at 6 to 8 months worth of processing for Discovery before it's ready to go.
Well, and I think to the question about the display itself, I would like to see some adaptation of the tribute that the Discovery team put together, the one you see over in the press dome there, with all the patches and the orbiter doing the reverse pitch maneuver. The team that works on Discovery and loves Discovery the most, designed that tribute, and so I think that'd be very appropriate to have with her wherever she ends up.
That will conclude today's pre-launch Conference. Please join us on NASA television today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the International Space Station Science Briefing. For more information on the STS-133 mission and its crew, visit www.nasa.gov/shuttle. Thank you.